This is how you start a show when Oliver is on his phone doing I don't know what. But today, I need to be a bit serious because we want to discuss an issue that is probably on everybody's mind. Can Kenya tax itself to wealth? The argument has been that Kenya has a lot of debt and it needs to pay this debt, and therefore we need to raise more money equals more taxes. Now, it is true, Kenya needs more money. It is true. In order for Kenya to meet its debt obligations and its recurrent expenditure plus development expenditure, obviously we need to raise more money. Fine, granted, sour. That's the bad news. But the greater question, the bigger question, is how does Kenya become rich? When I was a bit younger, I had a difficulty. And this difficulty was matching the month to my salary. I'm one of those people who married young. So by the time I had my first job, by the 5th of the month, and I was paid on the 1st, by the 5th of the month, 90% of my salary was gone. And I always used to wonder, how am I going to make it? Because like Kenya, you have bills to pay, you want to develop, you want to grow, you want to become this wealthy entity. How do you do it? Now, the discussion that is encompassing our minds is the question of whether to tax or not. Now, I wish I would find it in me to be bothered to discuss such a mundane topic, because I am one of those people who agrees that you cannot tax yourself to wealth. It's like making yourself taller by pulling on your suspenders. You will only hurt your nether regions. You will not grow an inch. In fact, based on the pain, you might lose an inch or two. Where? Only God knows. But let's talk about wealth. How does Kenya become wealthy? That is the question. Because in all my years studying economics, briefly working with the Treasury, what was in my mind was the question of how do you become rich? Now, listen, I don't know which book you've ever read that said country X put tax Y in place and they became wealthy. There's no such thing. I've said before on this show, there are very basic ways of countries making money. A, I told you, manufacture, right? That's how the Chinese did it. That's how the Japanese did it. That's how the South Koreans did it. That's how a lot of people did it. B, expensive natural resources. By expensive natural resources, I don't mean tea. Kenya has cheap natural resources. Expensive natural resources are oil, gold, platinum, and such minerals. Kenya has very little of that. 3 is banking. Banking. Luxembourg, one of the tiniest but richest countries in the world, is a banking center. So is Singapore, so is London, and the UK at large. Number 4, which is newer, is intellectual property, where you own the idea. That is where much of Germany, much of the United States has moved into. Those are the 4 ways to be wealthy. You think I'm lying? Let's look at the 4 Asian tigers. Which one of them is not a manufacturing giant? If you were to take Samsung alone, which is worth many times the GDP of Kenya, Kenya's GDP is about $100 billion. Samsung is a few $100 billion richer than Kenya as a whole. I do not say that to make you feel broke, but to make you understand that manufacturing is a big part of how you can be wealthy. Now, let's understand each other. Kenya realistically has two parts ahead of it to be wealthy. And it is not taxation. Number one, it is industry. Can Kenya industrialize? Can Kenya be able to copy Japan, China, and South Korea in being able to produce goods at such an affordable rate that we are able to export it to the rest of the world? And therefore, the depreciation of the Kenyan shilling in this very narrow, limited sense is a good thing. It makes it cheaper for someone holding dollars, yuans, or whatever to buy things from Kenya. So we should export more. It is a window of opportunity. But what does manufacturing take? Manufacturing takes a few things. Number one, it must be easy to set up manufacturing plants. It means that the things we need for industry, the machines we need for industry, must be zero rated. It calls for a reduction of tax. That's the reality. You can't do it when it's expensive. If you're asking me to bring a machine to separate water from a solid for my factory that needs solids, and you're charging me 16% tax, import duty tax, etc., to import this thing, then you are making a mistake, because wealth does not come from the taxation, it comes from the industry. Number two, what does industry need? It needs infrastructure. It needs roads and railway lines. Now, here's the thing. One sad story about SGR and the trucks you see written transit goods. They go all the way, sometimes all the way to Congo, full. They come back empty. Okay, not really empty. Your grandmother puts charcoal on you to pick up for you to pick up in Nairobi, but that's not really the purpose of the truck. The truck is supposed to move from the Congo, from Uganda into Kenya, carrying goods for export, but that's not what happens. Same issue with the SGR. SGR comes full from Mombasa and goes back with you and I doing local tourism, sitting in those awful chairs like this. That's the only thing it does, and we are not an export. We need to export more. So logistics, the transport system needs to be A+. Why? Because number one, some things need to be flighted out of the country quickly, and two, the cheaper it becomes to export our goods, the more competitive they are in the market. Three, what is needed for industry is cheap electricity. My friend, there are lights looking at me, cameras looking at me, and I can tell you, as a small industry owner, the cost of electricity is doing nothing to help my industry. Instead, you cannot compete with someone producing the same thing as you. Even if you're producing YouTube content as me, your YouTube content is more expensive by kilowatt hour than American YouTube content. Does that shock you? Don't be. Welcome to Kenya. Don't be a stranger in Jerusalem. That's how it is. So what needs to change? The cost of electricity needs to come down. The cost of energy needs to come down. That also speaks to the price of petrol. My friend, if you drive a car and you go to the petrol station, this is equal to facing divorce every time you go to that. My friend, it's like you died. It's like your wallet left you. It's like your loving wallet was hugging you at one point. Then you checked into the petrol station and it said, goodbye, I don't want this anymore. I found someone better than you. We cannot live in such a country. We need to change. We need to make the cost of energy more affordable. And why do we need to do so? Because if we choose the path of manufacturing, that's the only way to do it. But it doesn't stop there. There's the issue of attracting foreign direct investments. And here I have a worry. That worry is the cost we are paying for the devaluation of the Nairobi Stock Exchange. Safaricom has lost 30% of its value in 3 months. More than raising taxes, we need to raise the value of our companies. Oh, yes, we do. Look at the valuation of Apple. Nearly $1 trillion. 10 times the value of our GDP. When Tim Cook checks into a meeting, African presidents have to stand up because he's richer than them. He controls much more currency, hard cash, than 10 African countries put together. That's a reality. Now, hold on. I'm King Patriotism. I love being patriotic. So why am I being so hard on my country? Why? Because we have not chosen a national philosophy. We do not know where we are going. We have not chosen a path. We are a survivalist country. What do? We've got a hole, so dig another hole, fill the hole you have, so that you have another hole for another person to deal with. No, we must stop and we must think about it. If we are going to be a manufacturing powerhouse, we need to have companies that are properly valued. We cannot have companies like Uchumi, Nakumat, and Tuskys, which pop up and disappear in 2 seconds. Why? Because we allowed bad corporate governance to exist. Oh yeah, you did think I was going to go there. How do you run your company? How do you run your company? How many months of your workers' salaries are you holding? Oh yes, I'm talking to you, Mr. CEO, whose salaries from people you've hidden and taken. 3 months, you bought a Range Rover, but your people have not seen their salaries. And you call yourself a CEO? No. You are one of the things that destroys this country. Why? Corporate governance is a key element of any form of business. And any country that has proper corporate governance succeeds. So what am I saying here? Part of the point I'm making is that Kenya does not have a taxation problem, it has a philosophy problem. And we have 2 choices. I've talked about choice number 1. Choice number 1 is manufacturing. Asian Tigers did that. But there's choice number 2, which every young Kenyan looking at me chooses almost every other day. That choice is service industry. Did you know that in as far as import-export is concerned, Kenya exports more services than it imports? Did you know that Kenyans offer such immense qualities of services that actually it is the only surplus of trade we have? Services, our brains. That's what Kenya is known for. Listen, we don't have gold or silver. So you've got to deal with the hand we are dealt. What do Kenyans have? We've got smarts. We're clever. And we're well educated. We've got more universities than Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi put together. I'm not saying they're dumber than us. I'm just saying they have less universities. Whether that means they're less clever than us, I will leave that to you to decide. But Kenyans are smart. We can sell services. And selling services brings something very critical into this country. It's called foreign exchange. We are so good at it that a third of our foreign exchange, to the billions of dollars, by the way, comes from people, Kenyans, working outside this country. Yes, those people we laugh at going to flip burgers in Burger King or be house helps in Saudi Arabia, they are holding up this country, pulling us up by the bootstraps. I salute all of you. Clean that toilet for God and country. You're doing a good job. I do salute you. And the reason I salute you is because when you have 50 million people, the best thing you can do is put them to work. And Kenya is excellent at that. And I salute every Kenyan, both locally and internationally, who puts themselves to work to ensure they deliver. But when you're living in a country where services are key, what do? How do you ensure your country grows by and still encouraging people to do service? I'll tell them what you don't do is you don't tax them. You don't tax a YouTuber. Come on, you don't. Why? Because that YouTuber, by the way, who has 3 million views, is making roughly about 50,000 shillings if they're lucky. Now, if you tax them 15% of 50,000 shillings, my friend, that's 7,500 shillings. Let me tell you what that 7,500 could have done. They would have taken their friends out and bought EABL products and paid you tax. They would have sent it to their mother, and their mother could have bought salt sukuma wiki and made someone else money. Come on. The issue here is not raising taxes. We need to raise opportunities. We need to give Kenyans more opportunities. More opportunities equals more money equals more taxes. And that brings me to the very huge elephant in the room. Taxes don't mean diddly squat if you're stealing them. It doesn't matter how much tax you raise. If you're a thief, it's not gonna work. You see, last week I said that if you give a drunk person money, you're wasting it. Now, governments don't drink alcohol, they drink corruption. And a government addicted on corruption cannot deliver. Oh, you don't believe me? Let's look at the biggest exporter of natural gas in the world, the Republic of Russia. Mother Russia launched a war against Ukraine. They thought they would win it in a week. Now, almost a year later, they're hardly winning. They've not moved into a quarter of the country. Why? Do you know why? Because a general was supposed to buy tires and decided to buy a yacht off the English coast. Now, the yacht is busy hiding from Interpol while Russian soldiers are dying because their tires don't work. Corruption kills everybody. Singapore dealt with its issues of corruption from the beginning. Because Lee Kuan Yew knew one thing, and he knew it for sure. If we are corrupt, we are not going anywhere. Corruption destroys everyone and everything. Listen, Kenya, to this day, loses a third of its revenue to corruption. And if not to corruption, to the largesse of our leaders, to the bouquets and teas and coffees and affluent trips outside the country. That's where we lose our money. We don't need to raise taxes if the taxes are being weighted for the way a crocodile waits for wildebeest crossing the Mara. No. We need to deal with corruption. And trust you me, every country that deals with corruption grows. So what do we need? Number one, we need a philosophy. Are we a manufacturing country? Are we a service country? What are we mixing the two with? Number three, we need to deal with corruption. We need to stop corruption. Yes, this is my public service announcement to my country. We need to stop being thieves. I said we, because I've seen it's not just the top, it's not just the bottom, but we are a collection of thieves. Alibaba and 48 million thieves. That's what we are. We need to change. Next, we have to deal with the kind of leaders we choose. Maybe I need to whisper this. But we are terrible at choosing leaders. How do I know? Babu Owino is an MP. That's how I know we are terrible at choosing leaders. that you can literally shoot someone and still be an MP? Babu, I'm sorry. Don't. We are friends. Don't chill. But you should be an MP. No. And so just Babu. We have a plethora of leaders that you would not choose to be the chair of your parents-teacher association or the chair of your local cattle dip. You would not. Now, Lee Kuan Yew had a solution, and that solution was simple. We need to make politics cheap. Yes, you heard me. Politics is too expensive in this country. To run for MP, you need 25 million shillings. That is 25 million more than money Kenyans would imagine. Because many Kenyans, when they hear Ponyoka na Mili on sijui inaitwaje, sijui musician bet, cheza bet, all of those bets, they hear Amili, they think they have made it. It's a breakthrough. Listen, you guys don't understand how much Amili is worth. There is a guy who was willing to sacrifice his wife and his firstborn for Amili and a matatu. If that guy got his Mili and matatu, he would still not be able to run for MP in the most rural village in Kenya. He would not be able to. So can you imagine you killed your wife and your firstborn and you can't be an MP? The only way to be a political leader in this country, we made it so expensive that you have to be a thief. That's what we've done. It means that the guy with bright ideas but has a juakali job cannot run for office. He would not win. He would not win because he cannot afford to give you the 500 shillings it takes you to go to the ballot box. That's why he won't win. So that needs to change. That needs to change. We need to be able to choose leaders based on the quality of their character and not the quantity in their pockets. That's what needs to change. And if it doesn't change, you know what happens? I'll tell you what happens. We start singing Aringa Ringa Roses. Yes, that's what we sing. Why? Because we do a merry-go-round over and over, talking nonsense, achieving nothing. Should we tax? Should we not? Should we borrow? Should we not? Government after government borrows. Tax after tax goes up. Kenya is not changing much. What we need is smart leaders. We need leaders who are able to say, like Mwai Kibaki did, this is what Kenya needs to look like in 2030. He knew he was not going to be president in 2030, but he bothered to tell us how it should look like. Kenya needs a philosophy. Not more taxes. A philosophy. A philosophy as to whether we're going to manufacture, sell services, or a combination of both. Fight corruption. And please, we really need to stop choosing people who are dumber than us to lead us. I did not mention Sonko, but that's 101 for this week.
Wacha nikuoneshe mshenzi wewe takataka ghasia nongwe. Change type. Hiyo ndo ni pesa hii. Mbavu wewe. Change type. Kunguru ati sina pesa, sina pesa. Nataka wewe ati sina pesa. Unajua pesa ni nini wewe? Unajua maana pesa wewe? Unajua maana